Hey, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I'm Vance Taylor. I'm the Chief of the Office of Access and Functional Needs at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, which is a very long title. It is a lot of ink. It cost me a ton of money to print my business cards, but also they're in Braille. So it's a lot of dots. I think in California, it's probably like this unwritten rule that the longer the title, the better. So I don't know if it's an official competition or not, but if it was, I'd probably be winning. So I just want to take a little bit and talk about emergency planning and preparedness for disasters and kind of walk you through some thoughts on this. The reality is that every disaster, regardless of what type it is, or where it hits, or what the duration is, has one thing in common. And that's that it impacts individuals with access and functional needs to a much greater extent and degree than anyone else in a given community. And recognizing that there's this inequity in terms of this disproportionate impact, California leaned forward and created the Office of Access and Functional Needs. And essentially the governor said, we're going to create this office. We're going to give it a twofold mission. One is to identify what are the needs that people have before, during, and after disasters. And then secondly, is to working with the community, integrate those needs throughout every facet of the emergency management process. And so that's my mission. That's what I do. That's the opportunity that I have. As we go through and try and work on that mission, one of the things that, of course, we want to promote is health, security, and safety. What's interesting on that front is when we're talking about things like health, safety, and security, we promote that in a lot of different ways in our lives, right? We talk about advocating for ourselves, to our doctors, right? We talk about maintaining good health, good hygiene, physical therapy, taking our medicine, making sure that we're good. But one of the aspects that we don't touch on is our health and our safety and our security in a disaster environment. And in California, it's interesting because there used to be kind of this perception that disasters happen to other people, right? That's something I look and I turn on the news and it happens somewhere else to someone else. But over the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen this real uptick in disasters, really an exponential growth. And it's not just in the number of disasters, it's in the devastation and the scope and the scale of those disasters. So more and more, I'm really hard pressed to find anyone that hasn't in some way, shape, or form been impacted by a disaster. So maybe you've had to evacuate, or maybe you've just gone outside and been impacted by the smoke from wildfires. Either way, there's a very real impact. But when we're talking about health and safety, we don't always think about things on the disaster side. And that's something I encourage people to do. Preparedness is essential, right? I always tell people that you know, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, right? The next best time to plant a tree is today. That's kind of how preparedness works. If a disaster is going to hit tomorrow, it would have been great to have prepared many, many moons ago. But it would also be good just to start preparing today. So I want to talk about what that might look like for you. And the big question is, where do we start? All right. So, I always say start with the personal preparedness plan. I think one of the things that we can do for ourselves is just ask, what are the considerations that I need to plan for to be safe before, during, and after disaster? Do I need communication support, transportation assistance? Am I going to need sheltering? And we think about people with disabilities, people with access and functional needs. There are certain considerations that we have that our non-disabled counterparts don't have, right? I always remind people, when disasters strike, there's no time to plan, just to act. What we want to do is make sure that we're planning now so we can be ready to act. When it comes to evacuation, go 4 people deep. Let me tell you what that means. So if emergency alert comes through and it says you've got to evacuate, for my neighbor, maybe she just grabs a bag, throws it in her car, and takes off. But for somebody with a disability, that might mean, okay, I call a care attendant and I wait for them to come over. And then we start packing up all my equipment, my durable medical equipment, my assistive technology, my medicine, all the things I'm going to need. Then I wait for accessible transportation to come. And then I leave. By the time I've gone through that process, a lot of time has happened. And oftentimes during disasters, you don't have that kind of time. So, slide's jumping on me here. Sorry about that. Let's see how to go back on this. All right, I'm not quite sure how to make it go back. But going 4 people deep essentially just means if you're going to need help to evacuate, think of 4 people you can call. Right? For me, that's a neighbor, it's my wife, it's a colleague at work, my mom lives close. All these are individuals that would help me if I needed help. All these are people I could count on if there was a disaster. But the reality is that not all those individuals are going to be available to help 24/7. But it is realistic to think that some of those people, right, or for at least one of those people, is going to be available to help at any given time. So that's why I say have 4 people in your plan. If you can come up with 5, 6, 7, 8, that's great. Do that too. But just have people in your life, in your support system, your network that can help. All right, let's talk about this slide, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that you've got your own transportation and you can get out when you want. The bad is that you're relying on someone else. The ugly would be I don't have anybody in my support network that can help. And I'm relying on a first responder to get me. In each of these instances, the most important thing to remember is that you can get out, right? If you get out in your own car, great. If you get out in a friend's car, okay. If somebody else evacuates you, that's fine. Even though it might not be your preferred method, the priority is preservation of life. So be thinking about that and what that looks like. All right, what are you taking with you? Right? That's an important question, because you're gonna leave your house, you're gonna evacuate, and you gotta take stuff with you. Put together a go bag. Right? This is your lifeline. Every member of your family should have one. These are some things that you're gonna wanna put in there. Now, you're also gonna wanna think about whatever individual devices, tools, resources, items are important to you and put them in here. One of the things I'll say is when we start making these lists, they get really big, really long. You got to be able to carry your bag out with you, right? So you can't pack like you're going on vacation for a month. You got to try and keep it light. But have a go bag and have it ready. So if you've got an access or function need, you're likely going to need things like prescription medication, medically relevant phone numbers, copies of your health insurance card, your durable medical equipment, all that stuff. You know, number one thing that people forget, hands down, when I go to shelter, the number one item people with power wheelchairs forget is their wheelchair chargers. Which makes sense because they're just scrambling to get out the door. But you're not going to get real far without a battery charger. So, you know, come up with your list and make sure you've got a plan in place. And again, don't forget your meds. That's the other thing people forget. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the shelter and somebody says, I need my heart medicine. And you ask, well, what do you take? And they said, I take a red pill and I take an orange pill. And you go, what are they called? Well, one's round and one's square. And they don't know the doctor's name, right? They'll say, well, my daughter handles all that. Well, where's her info? Well, it's on my cell phone. Or where's your cell phone? It's on my house, right? So you want to have all that information on you in a go bag, ready to go at any point in time. All right, have a plan and then exercise your plan. I apologize in advance. I was a little rushed. So I had to use a selfie here on this particular slide, but you'll forgive me for that. So have a plan, right? How am I going to get out? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? What's it going to look like? And then when I say exercise it, that's what I mean. Just run through it. You know, we had a plan here at the house. This was several years ago. It's my wife. We've got 2 daughters. Our plan was, if there's a fire, they run downstairs, get the go bags. Each girl gets 1 dog, and we meet out at the mailbox. Well, I said, okay, everybody get in the room. I yelled fire. Boom, they ran, everybody got their stuff, ran outside. Came back in, everybody's high-fiving, great job. There was only one problem. Nobody helped me get out the door. So it's like, hey, dogs are safe, that's great, but dad's toast, and that's not great. And my daughters, in true sister fashion, they turned on each other. You were supposed to get them. Oh, you were supposed to get them. Right? The thing is, we can't just assume people are gonna do things. We have to make sure we each have a role, and then we have to practice. So just make sure and practice. Preparedness applies to every scenario. I mean, it's just as applicable during a fire as it is during any other event. And ultimately, as good as government can be, as good as community-based organizations can be, we need to plan as though we're going to be on our own with our own support networks. Like it's on us. Because if it's a big scale disaster, that's just the reality that you are going to be on your own. So you got to have a plan in place. I'm going to wrap up here, and I'll simply just say, let's see, how do I? Or stop sharing my screen.
At the very top, it should be green at the very top, and it should say stop sharing.
I've got an option that says new share.
You know, I can do it. I see it on my side. I got it. There we go.
Perfect. Thanks. I know, almost 3 years into a pandemic, you'd think I'd have it down. You know, what I'll say is that look, we all on this call have access to information and resources. We're going to learn a lot on today's webinar. We've got great panelists coming up, but not everybody has the benefit of being on this webinar. If we're not taking this information and sharing it with our friends and our family, and we're not sharing it with our colleagues and the people within our circle or sphere of influence, then we're not helping water get to the end of the row, right? Each of us has a role and a duty and a responsibility to help be the right person at the right time when people need us the most. And I'm a firm believer that we never stand taller than when we lean over to lift another. And that's what information allows us to do. It allows us to inform, empower, and help others. And now you're a part of that. So you lift and I'll lift, and the communities that we serve will ascend. So thanks very much for letting me be here. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Vance. Are there any questions for Vance before we move on to the next speaker? All right, let's go ahead, and Wesley, you're up next. Let me just pull up your slides.
Okay, so hello everybody. Can you guys see me? Okay, so here's my slides. So we're going to talk about safety when you go. Yes, Carrie. Thank you, Carrie. So we're going to talk about how to be safe at home. So go to the next slide, please. Okay, put that on. Go back. How to be safe at home. Safety tip number 1, have a key in your hand when you walk to the door. So it's very important that you have a key when you walk to your door, because people can walk behind you and they could kidnap you, or they could do something to you. They could attack you. So make sure you have a key so you get inside the door. Number 2, if someone drives you home, ask the driver to wait until you get into your house. This is very important, because if someone's driving you home, if you're not in your house, something could happen before you get inside the house. It could be attacked before you get inside the house. It could be all types of things can happen to you. Number 3, never undress in front of a window. Always close the curtains before you dress or undress. So if you're dressing, make sure you don't dress in front of a window, because people are looking. And always close the curtains before you dress or undress, because who knows if people are always looking. Number 4, never open the door to someone you don't know first without asking for the ID. So if someone said they're for the cable company, or say for the internet company, and they say they're the police or fire department, don't believe them. Let them show them an ID, because people would try to break in. Have them slip their ID card on the door or through a mail slot. Number 5, before you open the door, look out the window or peephole. Make sure you see the person and you know who it is before you open the door. So make sure you know who the person is before you open the door. Number 6, make sure the outside of your house is well lit. If you live in an apartment, make sure that the lights outside are all working. So make sure all the lights are working inside your house. And this will become a huge issue when we get to winter months, because it's not that much light. Number 7, never let anyone know that you're home alone. So don't ever tell anyone that you're home by yourself, because single people are targeted all the time. So don't let anyone know that you're home alone. Number 8, if you live alone, you might want to put 2 names on the mailbox or the apartment directory. People will think you have a roommate. So if you live alone, you might want to put 2 names on your mailbox or apartment directory. So people think you have a roommate. Number 9, always lock your door, gates, windows in your house. So when it's really, really hot, people would tend to open the doors and keep the gates open and windows open. And that's not a good idea, because criminals, they would target you in hot weather. So just keep that in mind. Number 10, have emergency phone numbers by the phone in case of emergency. Important numbers are for the police department, fire department, hospital, people you can trust that you can call if you're in trouble. Your helper can help you find these numbers. So it's a good idea to have the number of your staff, a family member, a friend, the police department, the fire department, the hospital, your doctor, because you never know when the emergency can happen. It can happen today, it can happen tomorrow, next week, next year, it can happen anytime. So any question about how to stay safe at home? I'll take questions now. Imani, are you there? Imani?
I'm here, Wesley. I don't see any questions in the chat just yet.
Okay, so next slide, please. How do I keep crimes that happen to me when I go out in the community? And I'll give you guys some bonus tips, because a lot of things happen in the community. When you're out in the community, the best thing to do is to keep to yourself, because if you keep to yourself, you stay out of trouble. If someone's trying to make you mad, don't make them mad, because people will try to target you, because they try to push your button to see what can happen. And if you're in a car, if someone's driving really bad, just let them drive bad. Don't try to challenge them, because who knows, that person in a community might have a weapon on them. So you have to be very careful about people, because you don't know what people are capable of. So those are some bonus tips, and travel in groups as possible. Tip number 1, try to walk with a friend. Try not to go out at night alone. If you do go out at night, carry a flashlight. So if you go out at night, carry a flashlight, because that's very, very important, because criminals like the dark, and they like to target you when there's nobody around. Number 2, try not to go to places you don't know very well. Stay alert of your area at all times. So make sure you try to go to places you do not know very well. You stay alert area at all times. Unfortunately, tourists, in tourist areas, tourists, they get targeted because they're tourists. They might carry a lot of money on them. They might carry a lot of belongings. And if you look like you don't belong in the area, criminals can pick up on it and they can take advantage of you. Number 3, do not walk on empty streets, empty lots, constructed sites, buildings that are not used, dark places and near alleys. Walk in busy, well-lit streets. Avoid shortcuts. So you don't want to walk in the alley, because you walk in the alley, nobody's looking. You gotta be in a place that is well lit, because other people can see if something happens. Number 4, do not get in the car of a stranger. I know someone who got in the car of a stranger, and it's not very safe because you don't know who the stranger could, what they could do. Number 5, make sure to walk confidently. Keep your head up and look around. So make sure you walk confidently, keep your head up and look around, because criminals, they look for people that are unsure themselves, and they target that. Number 6, always look around you and behind to make sure no one's following you. So it's, what you do if someone's following you? Let me ask this question to everybody. What you do if someone follows you? Imani?
Yeah, if someone is following me and I feel uncomfortable, if I'm in the store or just really anywhere, I try to be very loud and bring other people's attention to what's going on. So that would be my best suggestion. Just get really loud. It might feel uncomfortable and you might think that, you know, people are judging you, but I'd rather people think that I'm a little strange than, you know, something happening to me. So be loud. That's my advice.
Exactly. And unfortunately, we live in a society where substance abuse is very prevalent. So people sometimes, they might be taking drugs and alcohol, and they don't even know what they're doing. So you got to be very aware of that. You got to be very, very aware of that.
Wesley, I also see in the chat, Debbie says, find a safe place to go to ask for help. And that Debbie also carries a whistle on the keychain.
That's correct. So if someone's following you, you go to a public place and make sure everybody sees you, and you say, someone's following me, because criminals, they don't want other people to know what they're doing. They want to single you out. So make sure other people know. Any questions? Number 7, leave valuable things at home. Do not take a lot of money with you when you go out, but make sure you have at least enough money for a taxi or bus. Or if you take Lyft or Uber, make sure you have your smartphone so you can take Lyft or Uber to get out of the area too. You guys know about that? You guys can take Lyft and Uber as well.
I think, I'm not sure if it's Lyft and Uber, but I believe one of those services has like a panic button through the app that you can use if something is going wrong.
Exactly. So Debbie Marsh, let me look at the chat. There's some comments that we had. Okay, so find a safe place to go for help. So if someone's following you, find a safe place to go for help. Carry a whistle on my keychain. So that's actually number 8 tips. Carry a whistle, something that make a very loud noise. This way, if you feel you're in danger, you can get help. Carry a personal alarm. So why do we want a whistle for? Why do you want to carry a whistle? Anyone know? Anyone know why we carry a whistle for?
Yeah, Debbie has a raised hand.
Okay, Debbie?
Well, I noticed that Carrie just put in the chat to bring attention to yourself and in case of an emergency. And that would be why I would carry it, because sometimes people ignore others maybe yelling and you don't often hear whistles. So it would be something different and it might bring more attention to me if I needed assistance or help. I also have one in the event of any kind of disaster that say, for example, you're in a building that collapsed and there's all kinds of debris on top of you and people can't see you. If you have a whistle, you could blow it to get someone's attention so they would be able to find you.
Exactly. So if you feel like you're in danger, you can get help. Carry a personal alarm. So that's the reason why I carry a whistle, because a whistle will go further in your voice. Your voice will run out, but a whistle, you can hear it from a long distance. Each staff is given a safety device alarm system to carry on us. That's good. So question number 9 tip. If you feel like you're in danger, scream fire. Why do you always scream fire around the help for? Anyone know why you would say fire around the help? Anybody? Why would you say fire instead of help?
I don't want to answer all the questions, but I think a lot of times I'm not sure why people do that, but I think if people scream help, other people may assume that somebody else will help them. But if you say fire, I think that signifies we all need to get out of this area, so somebody might come help you.
Yes. Make a loud noise, use your whistle, or run towards bright lights and people. Try to get in the store that is open. So if you're on the streets late at night and there's no place that's open, try to find a place that's open. It's like 24-hour stores, like maybe 7-Eleven and places like that. Go places where have a lot of people at. So that's a safety tip. Number 10, be aware, wear the headphones connected to a music device. A cell phone can distract you and make a target for danger. So why you wear headphones when you're out in the community? Okay, Alex brought a good point. People are more likely to get involved if there's a fire. Part of Monty saying it's like the bystander effect in sociology. Thank you, Alex. Okay, so we are a community, be careful if you're on a cell phone, because if you're a cell phone, someone can walk behind you and knock you out. If you listen to music, in both your ears are being you listen to both your ears, you can't pay attention to what's going around you. So make sure, if you listen to music, make sure you do it at home rather than out in the community, because around the community, things can happen. Any questions? How am I doing on time, Imani?
You're doing good. You have plenty of time. I can message you when you have like 10 minutes left.
Okay.
But you're doing great.
Okay, next slide. How do I stay safe when I take the bus? Number 1, plan and use the most safest, most direct route to your destination. So if you're taking a bus, let's say you could take 5 bus lines to go to one place. You rather take 2 rather than take 5, because the more buses you take, the more complicated things get.
But you don't have to do it. You can just look at it.
Okay. Yeah. So how many people here catch the bus? Anybody here catch the bus? Do anyone here catch the bus? So when you're in a bus, you're gonna be waiting for a long period of time. So when you wait for the bus, just look around like you belong. And don't try to get any competitions with anybody, because people will push your buttons to see how far they can go, and do it on purpose sometimes, because there's some people out there just don't care about anything. Tip number 2, wait for buses at bus stops that are well lit and have a lot of people waiting. So when you catch the bus, make sure there's a lot of people waiting with you. Don't wait for a bus by yourself, because if you're by yourself and something happens, you have the witnesses. If you're around a lot of people, something happens, you have a lot of witnesses. I have several clients that take the bus approximately 30. That's good. That's good. So any questions so far about catching the bus? Number 3, do not wait alone at bus stops, train stations, or cab stands. If you have to wait alone, make sure you have a flashlight and whistle with you. A suggestion, you could get a group of friends together to ride the bus together. So don't wait alone at bus stops, train stations, cab stands. If you do, have a flashlight and whistle. So make sure people can see you, because if you're by yourself and trying to take transportation, so I can do something to you. Any questions? Number 4, when you take a bus, try to sit near the bus driver. So this is a true story. On a train that's in LA, there was one woman that was on back of the bus, and guess what happened to her? She got raped on back of the bus, and no one knew because it was on back of the bus. That's the reason why you stay near the bus driver. The bus driver will see if it's someplace in the back. You don't know what's going on. Bus drivers, they get to know each individual. That's true. And just be aware of it. When you catch the bus, there might be people that might be drunk, they might be high. So just if they give you problems, just walk away from them. Just walk away from people that give you problems. You don't have to be around them. You just leave. So number 5, when you get off the bus, look at people getting off with you. Make sure you're not being followed once you get off the bus. If you think you're being followed, walk into the first public place you see. So I'll give an example. This is what happened to me about 25 years ago. 25 years ago, my friend and I was going to take the bus to the beach. And there was one guy that instigated my friend, and my friend got really mad and hit the car. And 2 guys ran after us, and I ran to the store to call the police. So you have to be very careful. You have to be very careful with things. Don't let people make you mad, because they make you mad. They're used to push your buttons, so don't let them push your buttons. If they say something, just walk away, because if you don't, guess what happens? If you 2 get in a fight, the police are not gonna take sides. They're gonna take you both in, or in some cases, the police might even hurt you. So you gotta be very careful. And be very, very careful. Number 6, make sure before you go somewhere, you tell people you trust 3 things. Tell them where you're going, tell them where you're going with, tell them what time you expect to be home. If you're going to be late coming home, call the person you trust and let them know how late you'll be. So there was one guy who was a billionaire. He never told anybody where he's at. His plane crashed. It took a whole year to find his body. So everybody needs support. Everybody needs support. So tell people where you're going to, who you're going with, what time you expect to be home. If it's late to be coming home, call a person you trust and let them know how late you'll be. So if I go out late, I call someone I trust and tell them I'm gonna be home late. So any questions? Okay, next slide. So does anyone have any questions about anything? Anyone have any questions?
No, but thank you for all the helpful information.
You're welcome. And one thing, just try to just be calm, and someone bother you, just don't let them bother you, because if they bother you, the doors can come by and they're not going to survey the situation. They're going to stop the situation. And if you're still upset, guess what's going to happen? You're going to be the one that is going to get attacked. So you have to be very careful. So,
It's true.
yes,
Oh, and I want to mention that just like Mary Poppins Returns, a cover is not the book, because I learned in my own life that just because people look good does not mean they're good people. That's my own advice. Thank you.
exactly. Exactly. That's very true. When I went to my vacation in Las Vegas, there are people, adult world, very attractive people, take advantage of people. So you gotta be very careful. So I want to thank everybody for this presentation. You guys have a good summer and be careful. Thank you.
You too.
And next slide will show my contact information. So if you need contact, my email is right there, my phone number, and my address. So thank you very much. You guys have a great day. Have a great summer.
Thank you so much, Wesley. All right, so next up we have Jim House.
One second, I didn't know Jim was signing. Let me pin him so I can see him better. Go ahead, Jim. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Jim House, Disability Integration Manager for Washington State Independent Living Council. I'd like to explain to the group Coalition on Inclusion, Emergency Preparedness, and Planning, and the reason why CIEP, an abbreviation, we'll just put it like that. And so, as Vance had explained about how to be prepared for an emergency, you know, pack your bags and so forth, have things ready to go. Okay, but we'll talk about, and then Wesley explained about protecting yourself, going out into the community, safety. And now I like to talk about how to make your community protect you. It takes a village. So the next slide, please. CIEP, it's a state advisory group, and, technical advice on inclusion, emergency planning, setting up partnerships that work for more effective quality planning, response, and recovery. And we are funded through a grant from the DOH, and it began 2015, and now in 2022, in our 6th year. Next slide. Okay, we figure things out right here. Okay, so why do we have to include people with disabilities? This could apply to others, that those are rejected in the community, BIPOC, BIPOC, Asian Pacific Islanders, to those groups would benefit from this type of activity. reason why is today we have to plan for people with disabilities, without us. And if it doesn't include us, your plan will always fail. So today, you shouldn't do anything without us. We all need to be there at the table. Next slide. And people with disabilities know the subject matter. They are the experts. We already know the services, the materials, the support systems. We already know where they are. It's not the same as providing services. It's already embedded in us. We already are leaders for our services and planning and getting others in the group with different disabilities, with various disabilities, as contributors and collaborators. Qualified advisors who understand and think through issues from disabilities, access, and functional needs, and universal design perspectives. So our group, CIEP, can help make connections, and we have our expertise, and we can look for the specific materials and get those connections. Next slide, please. So if you know about the disability policy timeline, we have 1990, the ADA passed, which required equal access to all local and state government services, including effective communication. And then in 1998, Congress amends the section of the 508 of the Rehab Act in 1973 to require federal agencies to make their electronic and information technology, EIT, accessible to people with disabilities. And in the year 2000, FCC required all broadcasters to make TV emergency bulletins accessible visually and orally. In 2004, there was an executive order. President Bush had made the executive order 13347, and it strengthened the emergency preparedness with respects to individuals with disabilities. And then 2 years later, 2006 executive order, another presidential order 13407, included in the pause the capability to alert and warn all Americans, including those with disabilities and those without an understanding of English language. And in 2010, there was the Communications and Video Accessibilities Act, which required the FCC and carriers to support texting to 911. Those are the policies under the law that affects a person with disabilities and everyone around us. And there's a lot more. The other ones that are Sanford, there have been other amendments to the law that have given us our rights as people with disabilities to have full access to emergency services.
Ready? Next slide. So Washington State Independent Living Council and CIEP have a lot of different partnerships, collaboration. Like I said, it takes a village to be successful. And the 4 centers for independent living in Washington State, there's a lot of individual disabilities, advocacy, Americans, the Red Cross, the American Red Cross, Region 10, and then in the Northwest, ADA Center, excuse me, Northwest ADA Center. And we have a lot of collaboration in protecting our equal in transportation issues. So Washington, Department of Rehab, Vocational Rehab, the Office for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and the Regional Service Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, assistance, self-assistance program and services for the blind, and many, many more. It's a long list. Next slide, please. So if you can imagine, there's what's included in the plan for your groups. Remember the 3 pillars of accessibility, the 3 needs. It's kind of like legs on a stool. If one's missing, it's going to fall over. So you need the announcement of communication access, effective communication access, program that's accessible, and then also physical accessibility. And I'll explain more about that on the next slide. So for an example, effective communication. Addressing the best practices and the gaps in access to 911 and the other community emergency notifications, including people who are deaf-blind. Often is overlooked. Washington School for the Deaf, for the Blind, they have the features designed for people at their website, the www.blindcovid.com. And then the masking, there's been a struggle with the masks. They can't see their face. So they have this open mask where they have a window where you can see through. So people have an easier time to lip read and be able to catch the facial expression. In Washington, the Department of Health has established education videos on a variety of topics, COVID, and so forth. There's a long list that you can see at the website. So a deaf person who doesn't understand can see it in sign language. So these videos, and our Independent Living Council has COVID resources. So there's several examples. Next slide. The program for the access, or pragmatic access, excuse me, means we have to change the policies to reduce the barriers for people with disabilities. For an example, during COVID, prior to that, people would get together in high school, or an event, a big event where there's a lot of gatherings, very crowded, and a lot of people in one room. Because of COVID and being so contagious, what we call it is a net and shelter, hide and shelter. So most had used models, dorms, or individual rooms, or family room, keep everyone separated. In 2020, this disaster really happened when there was really bad fires in Washington State. And this CIEP was able to stand up, and someone had lost their home in the fire, and they needed a temporary emplacement or permanent place to live regarding with their disability, or maybe they have lost their wheelchair in the fire, it may have been gone, so it was replaced. And then one shelter did not have an ADA shower, so the person couldn't use that. So we had called one facility to bring that accessible shower. So COVID really showed all of the gaps. On-time accessibility was really important information about the vaccinations in real time, in the announcements and the times that had been changed and so forth. And then by the time that information got to us, it was old. So people want to register or volunteer to get vaccinated online or on the internet. You taught them on the computer on how to apply or to call. And then they were able to get through. And then also on the video phone or the video technology, like today on Zoom. And also in the early days, we had struggles with the technology access and how to set up interpreter and captioning. And now these days it has greatly improved, but there are still more work to be done. And there are many places that don't even have the internet in the first place. So they can't afford it, or it's just too expensive for the company to provide those lines at your home. They're maybe at a far distance or rural area, like a farm. So it becomes too expensive. So there's a program accessibility that's been discussed. And then there's also the physical accessibility. Next slide. Okay. So one of the good things about or out of this COVID pandemic is that it took many of the centers like independent living and the CARES Act, the CARES funding for personal protective equipment to be able to help with food and rent, to have affordable, accessible housing, mental health services, and addressed the isolation through virtual programs. Also, the ADA, the assessment for the ADA, the Department of Health, and the local shelters with vaccinations and testing and a variety of things. And we were able to increase the ability for an expert state emergency plan, expert state readiness emergency plan. So we have a lot of people participating with disabilities in the emergency preparedness. Next slide, please. More awareness. So our job continues, to bring up the disabled voice, the larger community. Since COVID, it's been a real mess and it really affected the disabled community. For an example, many people who are deaf and hard of hearing are in your state. How many are there? How many are blind or in your city or in your county? It's not much. It's not much to get that information, get that data on the people who have a variety of disabilities or even different languages. So how many do you have in your area, more specifically? So we have that data, and then when you have that data, you can plan better. And also to increase the partnership or collaboration between disabled advocacy organizations and state agencies and the Department of Health and Emergency Management. So you get everything, all of it in Washington, that the grants were donated or given to the different community areas or organizations. That was distributed, for the vaccine information for the disabled, and also the LEP, which means limited English skills, and also the BIPOC, and also the development of equality or equivalent vaccinations for people who were not able to leave their homes. So they were stuck maybe with a machine at home or some other type of device that they were not able to leave their homes. So they weren't able to stand in lines. So, and there was no accessibility to the technology. And it was a struggle to be able to get through the system. Next slide. So when you make a recommendation to the emergency management, or either your local emergency management, or you want to go into the full integration of the emergency program services and activities that tend to be that happen in the mainstream, like 911 calls, CERT, training, and also disaster drills, community training and drills. They're all compiled and participating. The programs, modifications, the policies, the rules, the practices, and the procedures that are necessary to provide people with disabilities the equal access to the emergency programs and services. And the plan of the budget, emergency planning of the budget, or had an additional cost for people who have disabilities for the modifications. Next slide. In Washington, we have different levels of the state level, like me, the CIEP, and then we are in collaboration with the local level and the county level, the variety of counties like Seattle and some other cities. And then there's also collaboration with the national level. There's FEMA, in Region 10, specifically in Region 10. And then there's also a collaboration in disaster readiness and the other emergency management groups. And I am all of the community's approach. So that's how we are able to make your communities more safer. Next slide. So here's an example, if you can imagine what it was like, it looks like. Next slide. So the National Emergency Partnership, including FEMA, Region 10, the partnership that includes Disaster Strategic International Association of the Emergency Management, the National Emergency Numbers Association for 911 issues, work with the American Corps in Washington, and the Citizen Corps, the CERT, which is Community Emergency Response Team. So if you want to go beyond that and be prepared and prepare yourself and for the rest of the communities, you know, and have a good jump on that, get involved and teach these skills on how to better protect yourself and also your skills, because those of you that you'll be their first responders, and if something bad happens like an earthquake, you know, and the governor will announce to, you know, be mobile with, you know, a lot of different avenues that we have to get up and be able to assist each other. Next slide. So some of you may already know about the CMIST. So that is more specifically of the area that needs help. So we work in collaborations to improve in our communications to, you know, for like medical, a person who has a right to have their independence, their self-decisions, you know, services and the supports and the transportation. Next slide. So my role is to identify the resources and contact and advise. Have a list. I have a list of about maybe 30 to 50 people who's on the list, maybe about 20 to 30 participants every month that we meet on Zoom. And we all get together and discuss and about accessibilities and, you know, diagnose it or break it down, you know, and apply it to other types of trainings that have gaps, and provide the technical assistance in emergency management and health officials or officers for the emergency review of the plan. So in the context in the short and long-term health. And then next slide. So this is related to, he's freezing up on me. So if there's any roles in or reports of the health, the long-term health. Next slide, please. Sorry. Pulls up a little bit. Okay. So anyways, on how to develop, you know, a coalition or a group that you're able to develop and organize. You know, first develop the relationship with your community partners, exchange information, what resources that you have, what they may have, and find out what skills that they have and share your skills. And together you'll foster a group, and then you'll have, you know, roles and responsibilities, reaction and recovery, long-term health, for long-term health. Are there any questions before we go on? Because I know I've said a lot. Okay. So we'll almost be done here. And the next slide, please. So statistics on Americans with disabilities. In 2010, 10 years ago, there was 57 million people living with or identified having a disability. Now in 2020, that number has gone up, so we don't know. But the 20% of Americans, we'd say like 48 million, you would count, has some type of, I'm more on the farther side, or some people maybe are more on the other side of different communication methods or modes. You know, with using an interpreter or using captions or having to write. There's a variety of modes to meet their needs, individual needs, and a variety of situations. And there's about 13 million who are or have low vision or legally blind. And children, 1 out of 68 children have been identified as having spectrum disorder, autism spectrum disorder. Then people speaking other languages in their home. So this is where your accessibility or your functions or needs are, is very broad, or very general. You know, you may have almost everyone has something. So
Switch interpreters. Next slide. So in Washington State, we have several resources to contact when you have accessibility function questions, working with regional partners. Next slide. And so we have a monthly Zoom meeting the first Wednesday of the month, 10 to 11. And that's when the time people where we get together and we learn about each other. Also, we discuss any recent effects that are happening. We do have a quarterly meeting that we send out as well. Also, anyone's interested in the meeting or talking or discussing, and you can set it up for your community as well, in your state. I know California has fabulous programs set up already. And we just hope that other states learn from us as well. And if there's any questions, I'll go ahead and ask if there's any more questions out there. Let me check the chat. ESL, tutoring in former job. Okay, yes, yes. Sometimes, not only for society that doesn't recognize people with foreign languages regarding technology. Over 150 years ago, the phone was created. So, you know, 80 years before we had to wait 80 years before getting the TTY. And then that was sent out around the 1950s. We had to wait till 1990s to get captioning. So there's a lot of delay in the technology. And now today, we're expected to have communication access and get information at the same time as other people, and not to be waiting so long for information, like 1 or 2 months later like we used to. Yes, that's it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Jim. Let's see the question. Okay, next up we have Donna.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking about emergency shelters today, how to find a shelter and what to expect when you get to a shelter. Now, for those of us who live in Portland, we're looking at some very high temperatures this weekend. We're used to the temperatures being in the 60s, maybe the 70s, but we are looking at 90-degree weather coming up. So there might be a situation where you might need to find a shelter. I know in California that there are many different types of disasters that occur often, whether it's a wildfire or an earthquake, many things. So it's always good to be prepared for disasters and to plan for moving into an emergency shelter if it is not safe to stay in your home. Next slide, please. So I've been involved with the City of Portland Neighborhood Emergency Team since 1995 in different roles. I started to volunteer to teach emergency preparedness to people with disabilities, inclusive power outage planning, heat wave planning, and wildfire planning. I am a disabled person, and I noticed that in the trainings that I went to, there wasn't very much information for people with disabilities, and I decided that I would learn that information and then teach other people from there. I also teach first responders how to better communicate with people with disabilities and to plan accessible meetings. Next slide, please. So the first question is, are you prepared to go to an emergency shelter if you're unable to stay in your home in an emergency or disaster? How many people here are prepared to go to a shelter if they need to do that? You can just check the chat really quick to see. Well, this presentation is going to teach you what you need to know. Oh, Wesley, we're going to teach you how to be prepared. Next slide, please. So the first thing is finding a shelter. And you want to look up this information before, during, or after disaster or emergency. You want to listen to local TV or radio for shelter information. Call 211 for emergency shelter or transportation in California, Oregon, and Washington, or call 911. Next slide, please. And then what do you take with you to the shelter? You want to prepare in advance by putting together items prior to a disaster or an emergency. So you're going to want to have a go kit for yourself, caregivers, or other family members going to the shelter with you. Make sure you include personal information, including ID, insurance, contact information for your family and friends. Next slide. Do you have any special dietary needs or food? If so, you need to bring your own non-perishable food. Next slide. Medical information. Be prepared in advance by putting these items in your go kit. I think we heard Vance talk about people who didn't have their medical information when they got to the shelter. So you should have a 30-day supply of medication. You should have a copy of all your prescriptions and their dosages or treatment information. And make sure you have the name and phone number of your medical provider or doctor and your home health agency. Next slide, please. So being prepared in advance by knowing what equipment you might need. So you take all your medical equipment and supplies such as oxygen tanks, etc., that you require to sustain you for a minimum of 2 weeks. Make sure prior to going to the shelter that you label all of the parts of your medical equipment to make sure you have everything when you leave the emergency shelter. You can take some tape and write on there, CPAP machine, And then you can also write that on the extension, the plugin for that, so that you make sure, okay, I have my CPAP machine, I have the cord to plug it in, I've got my mask, and I have the other parts that I need for it. So you don't show up to the shelter without it. But also when you leave the shelter, if you have it labeled, then you'll know that you're bringing all those parts home with you. And then it's a really good idea to have the name and the phone number of the medical equipment supply vendor. That's very important. Next slide, please. So what do you expect in a shelter? What should you expect? Next slide. Well, generally, local and state governments set up emergency shelters in a disaster or in an emergency to provide food and shelter. If you need special needs, you may want to find a special needs shelter in your particular, if your particular medical condition requires daily assistance. General population shelters are able to provide basic first aid along with the basic necessities for survival, including food, water, and a warm place to sleep. Keep in mind that shelters may be crowded, noisy, boring, short-staffed, and have little privacy. Next slide, please. So what if you're sheltering with your pet or service animal? When you must evacuate from your home, take your pets and service animals with you. Don't stay home if it's not safe. If you're staying with your pets, just take them with you and find a shelter. And then that's the best plan for you. Next slide, please. So when you're sheltering with service animals, just a reminder that all shelters are required by law to accept service animals according to the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. There are only 2 questions that shelter staff may ask you. First question, is that a shelter dog or a service dog? And the second question is, what task or work does your dog perform for you? Those are the only questions. They can't ask you what your diagnosis is, what your disability is, none of that, just those 2 questions. Next slide, please. So you want to prepare in advance to take your service dog to a shelter. Prepare a go kit for your service dog that includes food, medication, a bed, or other comfort items like their favorite toy. You also want to include the name and the phone number of your service dog's veterinarian. And finally, have a plan in place prior to a disaster for your service dog. Next slide, please. Sheltering with pets, it's important to know that not all shelters accept pets. I live in Multnomah County, Oregon, and I am fortunate because our shelters here do take pets. So, but you do want to prepare a go kit for your pet or pets. You want to still include that food, medication, bed, or other comfort items. Again, the name and the phone number of your pet's veterinarian, and have a pet plan in place prior to disaster for your pets. This could be a plan to have a neighbor or somebody else take the pet if you're not able to take it to a shelter. Next slide, please. So you might have to research in advance where there may be pet-friendly shelters located in your area, and identify shelter alternatives that meet your needs and the needs of your pet, such as a hotel or motel. In Multnomah County, our animal service program actually will take in pets temporarily if you don't have housing at that time or if you've experienced a disaster. And make sure you connect with family, friends, and community members to create a plan that will keep you safe and your pets safe. And again, don't leave your pets behind if you do need to evacuate your home. I just want to say though, if it is not safe to stay in your home, you do need to evacuate. So don't stay behind just because your pet is in your home. Take that pet with you. Next slide, please. Well, when should you evacuate in a disaster or emergency? Next slide. Well, there are actually 3 evacuation levels. The first one, level 1, is be prepared and get ready to go. This is when you're going to be packing up your items and preparing to leave. Level 2 is everything's packed. Now you're getting set to go and waiting for that information. Level 3, it's time to go. As soon as they announce level 3 evacuation, at that point, you do need to leave your home. But it's important to understand that people who need help or more time to evacuate should evacuate at level 1 or 2, especially if you need to call for some sort of transportation in order for you to evacuate your home. Or you need more time to evacuate. Like maybe it's difficult for you to get from your home into that vehicle. Whatever you need to do to stay safe, that's what you should do. Next slide, please. Well, I went through that pretty fast, but are there any questions about shelters and what you can expect? So one of the things about pets is that in the past, when evacuation order has been given, a lot of people won't leave their home because they don't want to leave their pets behind. And so that's why I've kind of emphasized that a lot. Just pack up your pets and take them with you, and then figure out where they're going to go. But your safety and your pet safety is the most important thing to consider. And I think Vance talked a lot about making sure you were 5 deep, I believe, in communication. So in level 1, when you're getting prepared, that's a time also that you can call your family, your friends, your caregiver, and let them know that you're at level 1 evacuation, and they should already know what your plan is if you're going to evacuate. Communication is absolutely crucial in any disaster situation.
Wesley, you have your hand up?
Yes, so okay. I want to ask Donna. Okay, I can start my video. I want to ask Donna, what about if you have to evacuate from a long distance, like a Hurricane Katrina? A lot of people from New Orleans had to go all over the country because there weren't a lot of shelters that was in the area. So what do you do in a long distance evacuation?
Well, that's a really great question, Wesley, because when you get to the temporary shelter, there's going to be support teams there from FEMA, Red Cross, other organizations. And if you cannot return to your home, then that is one of the things that they are going to provide planning for you. So that's why it's important to have all that medical information and your ID and all those things with you, so that you have the information to provide the organizers. However, if you forgot it or something's happening to it, they still will be able to help you.
Okay,
Does that help?
That helps, Donna. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Well, I'm going to turn it back to you, Amani.
Perfect. I do want to make sure everyone sees the resources.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for the resources, I included how to search for a pet-friendly hotel. And this is important because if you do have home insurance or rental insurance, it actually might cover the cost of you staying in a hotel. However, you've got to make sure that it's a pet-friendly hotel, because even in a disaster situation, not all hotels will take pets. They have to take service dogs, but they may or may not take pets. Also, I included the Florida Disaster Preparedness for Pets plan because I felt it was really a good list to follow. And I really did have a difficult time finding resources on shelters. And since Florida experiences a lot of hurricanes and things like that, they seem to have a pretty good plan in place. What to take to a shelter, again, the floridadisaster.org. And then where I got the information on levels of evacuation is actually from the City of Portland site.
Thank you, Donna. I think that's the end of the slides. Oh, and your contact information.
Oh, yeah, there's my contact. So feel free, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at this email address.
Just check the chat one more time. I don't see anything new. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Are there any last minute questions you want to ask? I think that might be all. Thank you so much to all of our speakers, to our interpreters, and thank you all so much for joining us. Wesley, did you want to add anything before we go?
I wanted to say, everybody be careful out there and be prepared for emergencies.
Yes, that concludes today's webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye, everyone. Thank you.